Welcome to the Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. Today's episode is part of our new this year series, Comfy Chairs, Hard Questions. Comfy HQ, a bite-sized offering to help grow our knowledge of leading and learning. During each HQ episode, I answer your questions about specific Comfy Chairs topics or how to tackle day-to-day leadership challenges on any other subject that fits into the beautifully broad category of leading and learning. My aim is for us to learn together. Today, I'm answering just one question and doing a deeper dive into some thoughts on leadership style. So our question today is, how can you develop a personal leadership style that fits your strengths? I have to admit, I get a little distracted by the word style. It's likely the fact that as a small girl, I wanted to be a fashion designer. Did you know that in French, when talking about someone who is stylish or trendy, the term used to describe them is, and pardon my accent, dans le vent, to be in the wind. Isn't that lovely? I always see scarves and dresses caught in a breeze when I think of it. Light diaphanous things being swept away with the wind. I mention this here because leadership style must be different. It can be adaptable, it can evolve, and it must never be trendy. But what is a leadership style? Earlier this year, I hosted a conversation on this topic, and we discussed a specific set of leadership styles. In that episode, I defined leadership style as how leaders show up, the behaviors that others see and experience when you lead. There are a lot of opinions available on this subject, and plenty of models and recommendations. You can certainly study the literature and learn how to lead in one style or another. But you can also craft your own uniquely defined style that reflects both who you are today and how you hope to lead in the future. And that's where I want to focus today, and will share my ideas and some simple steps for you to consider. Let's start at the very beginning. I hear it's a very good place to start. If you want to develop a style that fits your strengths, then you need to have a solid understanding of your strengths. There are a number of ways to go about this, and you can invest any amount of time and money you want or are able. I'm a fan of the Clifton Strengths tool. We've even devoted an episode of this podcast to discussing its application. You could purchase this assessment for a minimal investment and have a report in hand in very short order. Again, I'm a big fan, and this could be the right approach for many of you looking to acquire a ready vocabulary for your strengths. But there are also reasons to consider other approaches. Maybe you've used this tool before and want to try something different. Maybe you don't have the funds or other means to complete an online assessment right now. It's okay. You can create a list of strengths without a formal assessment and without spending a dime. Here's what I recommend. Set aside an hour or so to reflect on the times in your life when you have excelled, particularly those times when the task or challenge felt extremely natural to you and you experienced enjoyment or a state of flow. Be sure to look beyond your work experience for this. Think about your time in school and with friends and family. Maybe you enjoyed researching historical events and discovered new connections, while your peers quickly became bored or frustrated. Or maybe organizing things is easy and enjoyable for you, and others seek out your help or advice for how you do it. Or you regularly get feedback about how warm and welcoming people think you are. Collect all of these examples of activities, tasks, results, events, behaviors, feedback, and other moments when your interests, abilities, and heart have connected. Look for themes or patterns and then name them. That excitement you experienced in history class, that could be a strength in research and analysis. The fact that everyone asks you how you stay so organized, That's a strength for planning or even productivity. The feedback complementing your warmth, it could be called hospitality. A side note here, you don't have to have 1,000 strengths or be great at everything. Focus in on 3 to 5, maybe 8, but no more than 10 strengths that reflect you, your interests, your abilities, your own experience. A second side note, challenge yourself to be job agnostic. Focus on the strength rather than the setting or circumstances. This will help you avoid identifying strengths you think or feel you should have because of a job or title. You can take this exercise one step further and ask others for their input. Again, keep it simple. Ask 5 or 6 people who know you well and who will be straightforward with you to describe what you see as their strengths. Remember to thank them for their honest feedback and avoid debating or disagreeing with what you hear. Use this input and compare it to what you've identified so that you can refine your list as you see fit. Chances are you will see a lot of consistency between what you and those trusted people had to say. I'll save my thoughts on what to do if there's a mismatch for another Comfy HQ answer. So, you now have a grasp on your strengths. What comes next? In order to connect strengths to style, you'll want to spend some time identifying what shape these strengths take in your day-to-day life. How do you apply them? What behaviors and choices do they inform? How do others see and experience them? Let's take planning and organizing as an example. I myself am orderly and planful. This means that I dedicate time to making plans, daily, weekly, so on. It also means that I am capable of and enjoy assessing what tasks will be necessary to complete a project and determining the right sequence we need to reach our end goal. I also enjoy guiding others through planning steps and coaching them to find the approaches that will work best for them. All of this to say, I can describe how my planning strength plays out in terms of my time, work methods, and preferences, as well as in my interaction with others. Next, it's important to evaluate what pitfalls may exist because of your strengths. It's true what they say, an overused strength can become a weakness. Keeping with planning, as our example, left unattended, this strength could mutate into rigidity and micromanagement. And I don't know about you, but this is exactly the opposite of how I want to lead. If you'll indulge me in yet another side note, I want to comment briefly on strengths versus weaknesses in leadership and professional development. Throughout my career, I've been perplexed by the general aversion to the idea of weakness. We use coy substitutes like opportunities, blind spots, or derailers. I don't know about you, but I definitely have weaknesses. I'm hella stubborn, I freeze up in crowds, and as an HR leader, benefits administration brought me to tears. I could go on and on, because I'm very aware that I have weaknesses, and I'm guessing you are too. So why do we avoid talking about them? One of the reasons for this, in my opinion, is because we are naturally binary thinkers. This leads us to take an all or nothing approach, and it becomes a belief that if we talk about weakness, then everything is about weakness forever and ever. Our binary mindsets lead us to the conclusion that it must be right and better to talk about strengths, so that the conversation will be eternally positive and strengths focused. And for anyone who has worked for a leader who only noticed deficits, a bias for strength can be refreshing and highly appealing. I'm not saying it's bad. I am saying that this approach is not holistic, nor does it reflect a higher level of leadership maturity. Mature leaders, those who are deeply capable and skilled at understanding people and how best to lead them, can see both sides of themselves and their employees. They see and celebrate the strengths, and they see and acknowledge weaknesses. This is a result of awareness and an example of how to employ the competency of double vision that I've discussed before. It enables you to have a balanced view of the individual, and it paves the way to managing weakness and amplifying strength. Remember, if you ignore your weaknesses, they will blindside you, and your strengths may not be enough to save you. Okay. Thank you. Back to leadership style. Here's the thing. You already have a style. The work is to define it so that you can use and mold it to suit your strengths and your team's needs. So let's discuss defining style. This may be a little silly, but I think you can start by looking at your personal style as a first step on this path. Here's why. The way you dress or decorate or present yourself to the world tells you something important. It points to your preferences and what you find appealing and natural and comfortable. You can use this data about yourself and the lens of what comes naturally to me to map the shape of your leadership style. Let's break this down into 5 key areas or elements of style for you to consider as a leader: communication, relationships, structure, development, and failure. Let's explore each of these briefly and then walk through an example of how someone might define their style to align with their preferences and strengths. So, communication. This is a very broad topic, but in this case, think about how you share information, how often, what methods you use, how detailed or general you are, and other aspects of what people experience when you communicate. Ask questions like, are you formal or informal? Do you use a lot of technical terms or industry speak? Or maybe you tend to use slang. Do you communicate small messages with great frequency? Or maybe you prefer to save up for an information download. Your relationship style spotlights your interactions with others. Think about how private or personal you tend to be. Do you limit your availability or provide open access to yourself and your time? Ask yourself, do people experience you as open and inviting or quiet and reserved? Next is structure. This element addresses traits like reliability or spontaneity. Are you pleasantly predictable, or are you more random in your choices and actions? Do you prefer a scheduled approach or crave flexibility? How prominent a role do concepts like autonomy or accountability play in your leadership? Yeah, I think this is a good place to note that any single style or style element is neither good nor bad. They just are. What matters is if the style suits the circumstance. Next, we have the element of development, and that addresses how you deal with helping others grow. What are your attitudes to career and professional development? Do you delegate? What role do you take in others' development? Do you see yourself as a coach or a mentor? Do you coordinate challenges or encourage individuals to pursue their own interests? Finally, the element of failure. How a leader deals with failure is the cornerstone of their style. Do you accept failure or try to avoid it at all costs? Do you use failure as a learning experience or a motivation to succeed next time? Do you talk publicly about it or mourn in private? Each of these elements will define your style. You may think of other elements that suit you, your experience, or even your work environment, and I would love to hear about them. But in any event, ultimately defining your leadership style isn't just about knowing your strengths. It's about intentionally shaping how they show up for others. This means recognizing both what makes you effective and where you might need to adjust. So let's take a look at an example to see how this plays out in practice. Let's say we know a leader named Matilda. Matilda is a newer manager and possesses several admirable strengths. Among these is the ability to listen closely and quickly summarize what she learns. We'll call this comprehension. She is also a master of translating big goals into smaller, bite-sized work tasks. We can call this work planning. Last, but not least, Matilda is known for being consistently calm and focused during a crisis. Let's call this strength composure. Next, we'll help Matilda consider her strengths, comprehension, work planning, and composure, and determine how she can leverage them to craft each element of her leadership style. Starting with communication, we know that Matilda prioritizes listening and in-person dialogue that encourages employee input. Her planning skills lead to frequent updates. Her calmness and composure mean that others experience her as somewhat casual, but not overly informal. Much like her style of communication, Matilda's relationships are defined by receptivity, open and frequent discussion, and an easy flow of information. Because she is a planner, Matilda defaults to orderly scheduling and relies on policies, procedures, and subject matter expertise to guide her decision-making. She prefers to let employees take the lead in their own development, but provides accurate assessments and connects her team to short-term learning opportunities like training and special assignments that suit their needs and interests. In terms of dealing with failure, Matilda approaches her team's missteps as learning opportunities and puts effort into ensuring psychological safety. However, she recognizes that her somewhat negative response to her own failures can sometimes undercut what she is trying to accomplish for her team. If we summarize all of these notes, we see a picture of a leader who has a generally warm style that blends seeking input and maintaining structure. She acknowledges that others may experience her as rigid or perfectionistic at times, and intentionally relies on her listening skills to create balance. What I like about this approach is that it gives you a holistic view of yourself. It lets you acknowledge your strengths and reflect on areas of your leadership that may need further attention. It helps you lead, but it also gives you a roadmap for how to develop your leadership style. Moreover, this approach lets you be yourself without trying to force you into a specific mold or shape. A personal leadership style like this will stand the test of time. Here's my invitation to you. Set aside some time this week to reflect on your strengths. Consider how they show up in your communication, relationships, and decisions. Consider how you may need to refine certain aspects of your style to be the leader your team needs. Ask yourself, am I designing a style that represents the leader I want to be? By doing this, you will gain deeper awareness and equip yourself to lead in a way that's both authentic and effective. That's all for this Comfy HQ episode. Thanks for your questions, and thank you for listening. If you have a question for Comfy HQ, I would love to hear it. Just use the link in the show notes. Comfy Chair's Hard Questions episodes will be out every other week, between in-depth conversations about leading and learning. Next week, I'll be back in the Comfy Chairs with a conversation for leaders about problem solving with guest Jamie Flinchbaugh. I hope you join us.